All right. Hello, hello. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in again to another episode of The Accelerator. I'm your host, Lera Cooper, and today we have guest Bill Flynn. So I'm really looking forward to learning from all of your experience and hopefully hearing some good stories. Thank you for joining today.
Sure. Yes, I do have a lot of white hair, so a lot of experience there. Happy to
Well, I
share.
was that was less of a nod towards the white hair and more towards your statement that you have failed many times and succeeded more than most. So I'm curious to hear the backstory behind that.
Happy to share.
Awesome. Remind me, where are you joining us from? Where do you live?
I live in Concord, Massachusetts, which is just outside of Boston.
Oh, okay. Very nice. I'm just north of Seattle, so we're
Yeah, We're
not
the
that close, but the
we're
internet
the
makes it all possible.
the seat of the United States, right? Everything started
Yeah,
here.
cool. Well, thank you for joining. So, reading through your bio for this, I was kind of interested because, I mean, number one, the first statement was Bill Flynn has pitched Steve Jobs. And then you're clearly very accomplished. You've been a CEO, serial entrepreneur, best selling author, now business coach. So, how did you get here to where you are now? Because those are all pretty significant accomplishments.
Sure. So there's sort of two arcs to my career, if you will. I was fortunate enough to be connected through family connections in high tech in the late 80s and early 90s. I've been doing startups for about 25 years until a few years ago. I did all high tech start. I did 10 high tech startups here in the Boston area. At one point, I was 5 for 6. Went through 2 IPOs and 7 acquisitions. So the general um, feeling is that most startups fail. It's about a 10% success rate.
It's not great. You took all 10% then, didn't you? Or
Yeah, 5 for 6.
almost.
Yeah, I took it away from others, I guess. Yeah, and it wasn't me. I was one of many people. But I was fortunate to get connected to a good bunch of people, and we worked well together. And there was some luck and other things in there as well. The last four not so good, so I ended up being 5 for 10. I wouldn't
I
consider
think
the last
50 is
four
good.
successful in any way. And then about I think it was about 8 years ago, 2016, give or take, I asked myself, what do I want to do? I'd done, much. I'd done pretty well. I certainly still need to work, so not that well. But do I want to do an 11 startup, or do I want to try to figure out, do I want to do something else? And I looked at things, and there was an experience I had between startup 5 and 6 that went really well, and I want to do that again. So that was sort of coaching, for lack of a better term. And I found that I really enjoyed that. So I was trying to find ways to make that happen. And I've never been a CEO. The closest I've been to sort of running something was a GM. I ran
Okay.
marketing and sales and lots of other just service and whatever, but I've never been the CEO. So I wanted to feel like I could have confidence talking to CEOs and their leadership teams and helping them, or at least I felt confident, but I wanted them to feel confident in me. So I went out and learned some frameworks, and so I've now sort of created this sort of mural of frameworks, and I put them together. There's one foundational one. There's two or three others that I work, and I work into it. And I also have um, obviously real time experience, and I've been really researching business success for 30 years. So I take my knowledge of that and I sort of weave that into these frameworks that I share with people. And I've been doing that since 2016. And I generally have somewhere between 4 and 8 customers at any given time. Most of them stay with me for many, many years, which is great. So that's sort of the nutshell of the last. That's a quick 30-year review.
Yeah. Short story long. No, that really is a long story short. But even 5 out of 10 is a great success rate because looking at I know you kind of shared some statistics as well, but even looking at my own research, typically what 80% of businesses about fail within the first year. I think it's about 50% within 5 years.
Yeah, actually, so I have those numbers.
Yeah,
It's actually there, and they're in my book. So there's two data sources that I use, which was the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Small Business Administration, and their data is generally the same. Is that most businesses fail, 50% fail within 5 years,
Yes. Yep.
and over 25 years, only 16% of them are left.
That's wild. Well,
So
and
we continue to fail.
right, right. Well, and that's the point too is, the first year, very slim chances. Within 5 years, okay, 50%. But even of those that survive beyond year six, at least in my research, I found only 40% are breaking even or profitable.
Yeah,
So
so
that means there's still a significant
exactly.
amount that are not doing well.
Survival is very different than thriving.
Yes,
So these people,
yes,
it's either they're dead or they're not. That's it, right? Then there's a
right.
whole other group that is surviving, but
Mhm.
that means they could be on oxygen and they're still
Yeah.
surviving. And so most businesses do not thrive. Very few thrive. And that's sort of what my book is about. And that's what I've been researching is why do some businesses thrive? And not only just like for 10 years or 20 years, but for generations and some were centuries. One company I found has been around and is still around. It's been around for 1,000 years.
What company is this?
It sells mochi. Do you know what mochi is?
Like the dessert?
Yeah, it's frozen rice, right? And it's in Kyoto, Japan, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's still around. It's a family-run business. It's been run by the same family for 1,000 years.
Wow.
Just crazy. And there was another one, a pagoda business that just went out of business in 2016. That was around for 900 something years. So it can be done, but
Right.
most businesses fail or struggle for completely preventable reasons, in my opinion.
Well, that's a curious thought then, for very preventable reasons. So what's the difference between these that are just surviving versus thriving, in
Yeah.
your opinion?
So what I've found is that there is a gap between what science knows and what business does. We
Okay.
run businesses primarily on luck, timing, force of will, and effort.
Yeah.
Those things do not scale well. When you're
Mhm.
small, it's great, right? That's fine. There's just a few of you and you're working hard and you're doing these things. But as you get larger and larger, and if you don't change the way you do things, then what happens is that which got you to where you are becomes harder and harder to do because your Jim Collins says too many businesses are run by the genius with 1,000 helpers, right? And you have to give your business away to everyone, right? Your job is no longer running the day to day as your business grows. Your job is to predict the future of the business. And the only way to do that is to stop running it. Let other people
Mhm.
run your business. Teach them how to do it and or hire well. But most leaders don't do that because it feels good, right? It's
And it's time consuming to find people that you trust, right? And so you just continue letting yourself be run by the business.
exactly exactly so that you are in the business versus on the business, right? You're doing things in the business. And again, it feels good. That's one of the problems is that it just feels good because you like being the answer man or the answer woman or whatever. And that's not your job. Your job is to ask really good questions, really, and to have very few answers, right? Your job is to set direction and make sure that you've got good people doing the right things that they love, hopefully better than you do. And you're spending your time on the next, the 2, 3, 4, 5 years out. One of the things that I talk about with my clients is so when I work with my clients, I do an intake interview with everyone but the head of the company. And so
Interesting.
this is a leadership team. And one of the things I ask is what gives you energy? What do you love doing? That when you're doing it, when you're doing it for an hour, it feels like 5 minutes. And very often I hear, oh, I love solving problems. And so I store that away. And then somewhere in the first year, I say, who here believes that your job is to solve problems? And almost everyone raises their hand. And I said, I'm going to tell you something that you're not going to like because I don't think that's your job. I said, your job is to avoid problems. Your job is to think ahead and not keep solving the problem in front of you, but figure out what causes the problem that's in front of you. And if you keep doing that, the problems eventually go away. Now you'll have
Yeah,
new
definitely.
problems, right? But if you keep solving the same problems over and over again, the new problems still
That's a
show up.
problem.
So now it just becomes a larger and larger set of problems, which just becomes more difficult. And the weight of the business becomes heavier and heavier which most businesses slow down or stop. So,
Yeah, well, and then at that point, you're just not scalable, right? You
exactly.
kinda hit that plateau or burnout or whatever you wanna call it.
Yeah, and then 9/11, 2008, COVID, something happens and you're in deep trouble.
Yeah. So this is not really a trick question. I'm fishing here a little bit to see if you can read my mind or not. I it sounds like we're very similarly minded, very entrepreneurial, and we want to say, yes, please hire people that are better than me at these things so I can do what I enjoy, and that's work on the business and the vision of the business. Do you think everyone that becomes a business owner has that vision for themselves to work on the business? Or do you think there's a segment of people out there that are just going in trying to create a job for themselves and don't want to scale the business? They don't want to do everything that we're talking about.
Oh, well, sure. There are some people like me. I'm a business of one. I make a good amount of money. I don't want anyone working for me anymore. I have hired hundreds of people. I have fired hundreds of people. I don't want to do that
You've
anymore.
experienced the whole arc.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't have any desire. But for those who, so I work with people who want to grow, and either
Mhm.
they want to grow and be really big, or they just want to be what's called a small giant. They want to grow and they want to grow, but they want to grow in a healthy way, in a slow way, etc. And some want to stay small. There's actually a whole organization called Small Giants, where these people want to be, 100 to 150 people max. They don't want to get too big. They want to enjoy. They want to know everyone. They want to know their dogs and their kids and all that kind of stuff because that's sort of who they are and what they're all about. And that's great. We need small businesses are the things that drive the U.S. economy, right? These
Mhm.
these 6,000 really really big ones are a fraction of the whole economy. It's the other hundreds of thousands of businesses that drive all this. So that's a wonderful thing. So what I found is that most small business owners they sort of start their business through dissatisfaction, right? There's something that they're like, I can do better than that, or why does that work that way, or my friend keeps complaining about this thing. I think I can fix that. Whatever it is, some sort of dissatisfaction.
There's got to be a better way.
Yeah, and they have sort of this quote unquote vision, right? Is hey, when I could do this, and this is what it would look like when I'm done. But what happens is most of them don't share the vision in any comprehensible way with other people. They just assume that everyone knows what's going on in their head. And this is where they get frustrated. It's like, well, what are we doing? Why are we doing it that way? Etc. And it's like, no, well, your job is to, and my leaders, I say, your job is to write it down. And you need to write it down in such a way that it sounds like it already happened in vivid detail. It's like a picture that you're writing 1,000 words for the picture, right, as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah.
So everyone can say, "Oh, I get it. I see what it looks like," and they can say, "Oh, well, I should probably be doing this instead of that," right? But they don't do it. They don't ever write it down. Everyone I work with has a vision. I said, "Do you have a vision?" They say, "Yeah, it's sort of like this." I said, "Is it written down somewhere?" No. I said, "Well, then here's a book.
It's
Write it down."
almost too easy, isn't it? Like, oh, that can't work. It's too easy,
Yeah, but it's funny.
but
As
it's
soon as you
critical.
tell everyone what you're doing, and it's not just your
Mhm.
team members, it's your suppliers and your partners and other people. They're like, they're actually it expands your business because like, oh, now I get what you're trying to do, and they become more they have more affinity to what you're doing. They want to help you, whatever.
Mhm.
There's more empathy, compassion. There's all sorts of things, but we don't take the time to do it, right? Why? Because we're busy in the business doing other stuff. It's not like we're deliberately holding it, and some are, but most aren't. They just haven't thought about it. So I
Yeah.
go around, I ask really, really simple questions, and most business leaders don't have the answer because they just haven't had time to think about it. So I say, your job is to fire yourself from the day to day. Let's do that first. Then you'll have more time to think about the future of the business, which is a creation event, right? It's innovation, and innovation is about insight. And
Mhm.
I ask this of lots of people, Lara, and I will ask it of you. When you
Okay.
get your best ideas, what are you doing?
Not at my desk. I'm usually out saying I'm gonna rest from work, and then sure enough, work pops into my brain and it's creative and it is my best idea.
Exactly. The shower, on a run, on a bike ride,
Walking the
canoeing.
dog.
When
Yeah.
your brain is at rest is actually when insight happens. And this is a scientific fact, right? They put people in
Mhm.
fMRI machines and then we see insight. Insight is literally a rewiring of your brain. Two things that were in your brain that weren't connected suddenly connect. That's when you go, So literally your brain is doing something new. And it rarely happens when you're intensely, like, you can't say, I need to come up with a really good idea. It rarely happens, right? Like the things we
Right.
see
So
in the
quit your
movies.
job, go think for
Yeah,
40 hours.
exactly. It's actually, it's relaxing and being bored and whatever when the best
Mhm.
ideas come to you. And it could be in the morning or in the evening, like when you go to bed or whatever. Those sometimes that happens as well, or whatever. But if you're in meetings all the time and you're making lots of decisions, you don't give yourself a chance to have these great ideas. And strategy is innovation. Strategy is coming up with ways to do lots of things. And so most people don't have really well thought out strategies. They have sort of a vague idea.
Mhm.
So that's the
Yeah,
first thing you have to do, right? You have to
I
start
can
getting
agree with
things
that.
out of your brain so other people can help you, and then rest your brain so you can do these wonderful things about growing the business, predicting the
That's
future.
a good practical tip. And that's what we found too, just working with a lot of our clients because the firm, we pride ourselves on having relationships with our clients and not these transactional ones where we just talk to them during tax season. And those are our best clients, right? The ones that we talk to outside of just profit and loss and tax liability. And it's amazing when you just create space for a conversation without an agenda, what comes out of it. Obviously, on our own when we're out for a walk, but also just working with our clients and asking these basic questions of like what's going on? What's something that you're looking forward to? Actually, I'm thinking about buying this second location and expanding and okay, we've been working together for 12 months, haven't heard about it. And so it's amazing what comes up when you're just conversational and relaxed.
Yeah. I tell my team, my clients, you have to get out and talk to clients, right? And you have to do it. Lots of people should be doing it. And I do. I used to be a Vistage speaker, and I've spoken to hundreds, if not thousands, of CEOs around the country. And I ask them, I say, so who talks to their customers? And everyone, of course, raises their hand because you don't want to be seen as I don't talk to my customers. And I say, well, what do you talk about? And often they say, well, I ask them what they want. And I say, then what happens? They say, well, they tell me. And I said, so do they pay you for that? I said, asking for what they want isn't asking them for what they value. What you want to do is do things that they value, because then they'll pay you for it. Because most of the time they'll tell you what they want and they'll be like, great, thank you. And you don't make
Mhm.
any extra money, etc. And by the way, it's not their job to tell you how to create a solution for them. Their
No,
job
we
is
just
to
have to
tell
know
you
it's
their problems and their struggles. Right? Just ask them what's struggling, what's on your mind, what's a big barrier for growth for your business, what's on your mind these days, what's keeping you up at night, whatever. And then if you ask a good enough set of questions, then the fun part is, okay, we might be able to help you with that. We could probably do this, right? But most businesses, as I said, don't take the time to do that. They're too busy in the business than on the business.
yeah. So those are some good questions. You said with your clients, you start out by asking them some simple questions. So, one, is your vision written down?
One,
Two,
do you have one?
do
And
you
is it
have
written down?
one?
Yeah.
Is it written down? When do you think the best? Right? Can you can you share any teasers on other insightful questions that you ask that just get
Sure.
business owners thinking about where they're headed?
I have two ones I ask all the time, which is, now that you know the people that report to you, right, on your leadership team, now that you know who they are, would you enthusiastically rehire them?
It's good.
And the answer is always no. I've never gotten a,
That's a
oh,
bummer.
absolutely. This team is awesome. I always get, probably not. There's at least one or two that have been sitting in this job. And I said, well, if you're not surrounded by A players, then it's going to be hard to get rid of, to give away your business because you don't trust them. And by the
100%.
way, no one else trusts them either. And they're all waiting. All those A players that you do have are waiting for you to do something with these C players or the B players that are on a leadership team, and they shouldn't. Maybe a B plus that you're sort of bringing up, but that's fine. But you know that they've got a lot of headroom, and they just need some.
Potential.
Yeah, that's fine. The other is, I asked them. So if I walked into your Monday morning meeting with your leadership team, and I asked everyone around the table to write down in their own words, what is our current company strategy, and read it out loud, what would happen? And I get a laugh or a smile every time. Oh, they'd be all over the place. I said,
That is
okay,
good.
that's a problem. I said, because what's probably I said, one of the sources of your frustration in execution, right? We're not doing things on time. We're not doing them the right way, whatever. is that these people are executing really well on what they think the strategy is. So they
Mhm.
think they're doing great. And you're like, what the hell are you doing? I said, so it's your job to literally and figuratively get them on the same page. When I ask them that question, they should say generally the same kinds of words. And those companies that do really well, like Southwest is the best public company in the last 50 years. Supposedly, if you walked up to like someone that's doing like has a little cones, to direct the plane, or the
Mhm.
ones that are
Yeah.
putting the luggage on, if you ask them what is Southwest company strategy, they know it.
Good leadership. Good
Yeah.
training.
And it's 2 words. It's wheels up. That is our
That's
strategy.
good.
That is how we make money. The more often we have planes in the air, the more money we make. Everything we do is about getting planes in the air.
Yeah. No, it's easy to tie everything back to that as well, right? Even maintenance.
Like IKEA is flat packed furniture.
Makes sense.
They
I've
found that
had a lot of
air,
IKEA.
yeah, air is the problem in the furniture business. They eliminated air, and they are the most
Amazing.
profitable and have been most profitable furniture company in the world. And I think they might even be.
Sounds so easy.
Yeah, well, so easy isn't simple,
Correct. Correct.
right? Or actually, no, simple isn't easy. It's the other way around. Simple,
Yes,
it's
yeah.
very simple. It's not that easy
I
because you have to go through a
gotcha.
lot of machinations, and you have to have a lot of debate, and it's like, and you have to think about, what do we love doing? What does the market need? How can we be unique and different? What's our profit engine? What do our customers care about? All these things. But once you put all those things in place, then it sounds super simple,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But it
Well, and
probably
when
took
you're
them
when you're
years.
good at doing something, it looks easy as well. Yeah. And only so many people can get by on luck, right? Or sheer force of will.
Yeah, it works well for many, many years, and that's the problem, right? It's like, well, we've gone well so far.
Mhm. It's how we've always done it.
Yeah, but that,
Makes
like
sense.
Marshall Goldsmith says, what got you here won't get you there.
Right. Well, and that's the thing too, is luck might have gotten you here, but there's no guarantee that it'll get you there again. Like with a new venture, for example. I mean, you're the perfect example. You've had a fantastic record of success, but it's still not 100%, but you beat out the statistic because I'm guessing you apply strategy that is beyond effort, like luck. What is it? Timing and force of will?
Yeah, well, I will tell you, I wish I knew the things that I learned in the last 5 to 10 years. I wish I knew them 20 years ago. My life would have been so much easier, and the lives of others. These things I sort of learned over time, and now I really intensely studied business in the last few years. And I was like, wow, it would have been so much better if we had done it this way versus that way.
That's how it goes. I look back even 1 year and think, "Oh gosh, if I had known this," or it just would have changed even the delivery of something or the approach of something, even if it wasn't the decision in and of itself. So if with the clients that you have worked with, because it sounds like you have a pretty small group every year, is there a common theme between those that excel from your coaching versus those that maybe don't?
Yeah. Yeah. It's about mindset. It has nothing to do with the kind of business they're in, etc. It's funny when business leaders succeed, they say, well, I was smart. And then when they fail, they blame external forces, the economy. And it's almost always not true. One, neither of those statements is true. Usually it's you succeed because others have helped you.
Mhm.
And then often it's because you made poor decisions, and it could have been years earlier. If you really went and studied it, it did some regressive analysis, then it's some decision you made years ago or a set of decisions. But it's so far back you don't remember it. And so you try to find something more in the present and on the top of your mind. So when people say to me, hey, who's your best customer? And they're looking for some sort of size of business or kind of industry or whatever. And I say it's the mindset of the CEO or the head of company, which is he or she needs to be a humble, hungry learner that is comfortable challenging the status quo. And I will tell
An
you,
entrepreneur.
Lera, most of those people are women.
Interesting.
Yeah. Most of my clients are women or have
Very interesting.
feminine traits.
Yeah, that is an interesting statistic.
Yes. Most men are not humble. They don't want to look like they don't know anything. They don't want to seem like they're weak. We were taught from a young age that having the answer is where you are rewarded.
Hmm.
And the best leaders aren't about having the answer. The best leaders are putting together the best teams, asking really good questions, questioning things on a regular basis. And you have to have humility. The example I give is when COVID hit in 2020, whatever.
Last year, it feels like.
Yeah. If you looked at the countries that did the best in terms of the metrics, in terms of sickness and death, etc., they were 10 that were top. 8 of them were run by women.
Interesting. I
Yeah.
didn't know
And
that.
yes, and the woman from New Zealand was sort of the poster child. I can't remember her name now. Sort of with a J, Jacqueline something like that. But it was Denmark, Iceland. There were a few others. They had the best outcomes, and the worst were those that were these really intense and egotistical men. And
That's a hard one. I mean, honestly, in and out of business, it's hard to get very far with a big ego just because
you'd be surprised.
typically it's better typically more consistently it's better together. Of course, there's those that are lucky
Yeah,
and
yeah.
succeed just through sheer force of will.
Yeah,
Um,
I have no problem with ego, right? You have to be confident. If you're not confident, it's a problem. But it's when you start to believe
for
everything
the
you say is
negative.
true, right? That's
Mhm.
egotistical, right?
Yes.
So ego is good, but you have to understand that there's no way in the world you can know everything. It's just impossible.
Mhm.
There's so many different things going on in the world now, and it moves at such a pace, right? Businesses up until the 19, if you were on the stock exchange, I think your average lifespan was 75 years, give or take. In 2017, the average lifespan of people in the same indices was 15 years. So we just don't, things are moving way too fast. So you
Yeah.
have to understand that and realize that you can't be the bottleneck. You have to create an environment where you invite others to help you. And your job is to really, as I said, your job is to provide vision/direction, and not directions, not instructions, direction, right? We're
Mhm.
moving this way. Like this is what it looks like. It's not going to be a straight path, and that's okay. And if you build that, and especially these days, you need to build resilience into business, not a roadmap, because things change too quickly. Generative AI has come on like crazy in the last, whatever, 18 months. Who knew that was going
Mhm.
to happen? And it's potentially affecting jobs and all these other things. There's no way you could have planned for that, but you can plan for resilience. You can create a resilient organization where you're training your people to think for themselves and come up with new ideas and test and experiment and do all these things. So when stuff happens, they react quickly and they come up with solutions. It may take them a while, they may fail a few times, but the best businesses in the future will be resilient organizations, not one who's, if someone comes in and says, I have a plan, do not believe them, or believe them, but don't believe that the plan makes it, is going to work.
I'll believe that they think they have a
Yeah.
plan.
And there's two great thinkers on this. One is Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was the president of the United States in the 50s, and Mike Tyson, who was a boxer. And Dwight D. Eisenhower said, it's not about the plan, it's about the planning. It's about the
Mhm.
conversations you have. And Mike Tyson said, all planning is good till somebody punches you in the face. Then all the planning goes out
I
the
think
window.
one of my favorite quotes as it relates to business, and now I can't think of who said it, but it was general somebody, and he essentially said that a violently executed plan today is better than a perfect plan next week. Because unless you're constantly iterating, you're never going to have something to learn from. You're not going to be building that resilience. Sometimes things just have to get done. You can't approach business like a perfectionist, because if you do, I think you're just setting yourself up for disappointment, because you can't know everything. You can't be an expert at everything. You can't plan the future, but you can have direction.
Right. Well, so you can
Yeah.
never predict the future. I think Abraham Lincoln said this, but the
Mhm.
best way to predict the future is to create it. And that's what the people I work with do. They are in the business of creating their own future. They're thinking out, they're saying, what are the pieces that we need to do? And what they do is it's in service of growth, it's in service of going to that vision. But growth for growth's sake is the ideology of a cancer cell. So you also have to have an identity that says, here's who we are, here's what we believe, here's how we behave, right? Here's how we operationally do things, right? Here are the sort of the tenets of how we run our business. And when someone says, hey, I think we should do this because it'll help us grow faster, you say, great, but does that violate anything about who we are, right? Our purpose, our values, our beliefs, our operational objectives, whatever. And if it does, you will very likely regret it in the future. There's one
Makes
company I put
sense.
in my book, which is called Real Manufacturing, and they were actually in Small Giants, that the organization I was talking about earlier. And they almost went out of business. They were within 3 days of going out of business. And we found this out because the person who wrote the book, Small Giants, went back and after 10 years, went back and revisited all the companies that were in the book. And he went back to them and they said, we're in deep trouble. And he said, well, what happened? He said, well, 10 years ago, we decided to get into building hinges. They were a hinge manufacturer. They were a high quality hinge manufacturer, but they decided to do it for laptops because the laptop industry was exploding. But they were high quality. So what happens with laptops? The price doesn't go up. The price
Right.
goes down. So what do you have to do with the hinges? You have to make cheaper and less quality hinges. And what happened was the people who loved working in high quality things left the company. They weren't able to make as much profit. So they were then not treating their employees as well. So they started to leave. And they got into this mess. And it was 10 years between that decision and when they almost went out of business.
And that's to your earlier point. Right? Causation or correlation does not mean causation.
Right. They could have
Gosh,
said, oh,
that's
well,
brutal.
the economy's really bad, whatever. But it was really a decision that was made in service of growth, but in violation of one of their core values, which was high quality.
Hmm. Man,
They
that
survived. They're
is
still
brutal.
around, by the way. So they're still around. I actually met the CEO a couple of years ago at a small business
Good.
conference, and
Good for them.
yeah, they're a little smaller, but they're still good.
And I'm sure operating up
Yeah,
to their core standards, the core values. Um, you mentioned needing to build a resilient culture. Do you have any thoughts on how one can do that? Whether they already have a culture in place that's obvious or not?
absolutely. Yeah. So this is what I sort of alluded to earlier, or really stated earlier, is that resiliency is built by giving people autonomy and creating an environment where you're encouraged to try stuff. And in actuality, when you fail, it's a positive, right? If you fail in a smart way, right? You have to fail and learn.
Fail forward or fail fast.
Yeah. Well, fail fast is different than I think fail forward is a little bit better, right? So
I
you're
mean, they're
failing,
both, yeah, a little bit different, but
right?
both
But you have
turn
to sort of
failing into a
say, why did we
positive.
fail? What we're trying to do. There's something called a process where whenever you do anything, you review the process, right? And you ask some questions about it. So you're learning. So the next time you try it, you're not repeating the same mistakes. If you keep doing that and you keep giving people that confidence and psychological safety, etc., to be able to do that, then when something terrible comes along, they're not going to go, "Oh my God, what do we do?" They look up at you and say, "What do we do?" They're like, "Oh, okay, we got it." And they'll take the initiative. They'll actually probably be telling you what to do, especially
Perfect.
those. There's a saying that as business grows, the information needs to be closer. The decision making needs to be closer where the information is, right? And we don't do that, right? If you have all the decision making up at the top, and as you get bigger and bigger, it's slower and slower in terms of making decisions because it takes time to get back up, and then they're going to talk about it. And by the way, they haven't experienced it, so they're not in a good position to be able to make decisions on that. Of course, if you're a leader, you're like, well, I have to make a decision, and whatever. And often they'll make a decision and then push it back down, and the people that are down there are like, why the hell are we doing that? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, and sometimes the best decisions are just saying, I'm going to delegate this to the people that know best, right?
Yeah. And it's good to check, right? I don't think it hurts to have, is this in service of our strategy? Is it part of who we are, right? So you want to sort of put a check, but at a standards level, you mentioned that word earlier. I love the word standards, right? Standards are better to have than decisions. When I talk to my leaders, I said, you should make very few decisions and you should give feedback as little as possible, except to have a skill, right? Skills are different, right? If you want to get better at something, you want to, like I play
Mhm.
hockey and you want to shoot or skate, those are skills, and feedback is good. But in terms of behavior, etc., feedback is not good. But if you can set a standard, so for instance, the example I usually give is a meeting, right? And so instead of telling someone how to run a meeting, you can set the standards. Here's how we do meetings here, right? First, you write down the outcome of the meeting, the ideal outcome of the meeting. Make sure we're clear on that. Now that we know that, who should be in the meeting that gives us the best chance of reaching that outcome? And just them. Then you write the agenda, then you have the meeting, and then you inform people of the meeting who need to be informed. You're obviously pulling information beforehand, etc. So if it doesn't go well, like if a meeting doesn't go well, you can say, I'll say, Lera, how do you think that meeting went? And if you're not delusional, you're like, well, it was all right. And I said, okay, so do you remember the standards of our meeting? And you say yes. And you go through it. And I said, so what was your ideal outcome? And you might say, I didn't write one for this one because it was so, okay, so why don't we do this next time and every other meeting thereafter? Let's do the outcome first. And if you want me to help you, I'll be happy to help you and work through the outcome stuff, right?
Very coaching oriented.
Yeah, but you have to set the standard and creating those standards, and you don't need a ton of them. You probably need, I actually wrote down, there's probably 20 or 30 key standards you need to have in any business but then you teach that to your team, and then they don't need you anymore. Once they've got the standard, they don't need you anymore to do that. And by the way, so you can go do other stuff, which is predict the future of the business, right? Work the leadership team, talk to clients, talk to partners, get lots of information back to that insight. The best way to have insights is to gather information that you don't know is really relevant at the time. But then it's, you're like, oh, I talked to some guy 6 months ago. It's like, oh, but if you're constantly doing the business, you're in the business, you can't gather that information. You can't have those insights. And that's where we sort of fail. So I think standards are so important, right?
Do you have those? Agreed. And I'm big on kind of operating on principles versus rules, because you could never have enough rules for every scenario, but principles, standards, core values, they all kind of hit that mark of direction. Those 20 to 30 standards that you think every business needs, are those in your book or
no,
somewhere?
I came up with them after my book.
Okay, so this is a big teaser then.
Yes, and someone has encouraged me to write a book using them.
Yeah.
But I don't like to write, and so if you don't like to write and you want to write a book, it's expensive. So
this is true.
Maybe
an ebook. Short and
So
sweet.
I can't remember, have I put them? So I do write twice a month. I can't remember if I wrote I don't know that I have that. I could sort of put it out in I generally write short, sort of newsletter type of things, that are very actionable. I could put that out. I don't know that I have. I'd have to look. I have them in Evernote. I have them in my phone.
There you go. They exist somewhere.
Down.
That's good. We'll share what we can. Maybe I'll connect with you after this and see if there's anything that we can link for the audience. But I would definitely recommend.
Yeah, I could shoot you the things that I have. They're not fully fleshed out, but I've thought through them and thought through the different aspects of business, the different functions and things. And
yeah,
again, this is my opinion. There's no science behind it.
Well, clearly people have benefited from your opinions.
Yeah, hopefully.
Well, I have to say thank you for joining today. This has been a really just interesting conversation and practical as well. So if there are any closing comments or pieces of advice for listeners, what would you share? What would you hope that they come away with?
Yeah, so I already shared a lot of what I typically share. The one thing that I didn't share, so the things I talk about is have a vision, write it down.
Mm-hmm.
Really understand the fundamentals of business. We didn't get into this at all, and maybe we can do it another time, which is create a brain-friendly company. Understand a little bit about how the brain works, because it doesn't work the way you think it does. And it's constantly...
Okay, well, now I'm curious. So do you have time to tell us?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
So I'll actually use the meeting as my story, right? So I do this all the time. So let's say we're in a meeting. You're my boss. I'm running the meeting. And again, the meeting doesn't go quite the way it should have. And you ask me, and you say, you get up and you tap me on the shoulder and you say, hey, Bill, can you walk me back to my office? I have some feedback for the meeting. So what is going on in my brain right then and there?
No.
Yeah, I'm in now what's called threat mode. I begin to sweat. My heart begins to beat. And I am not in any way thinking other than catastrophizing. It's like, oh my God, am I going to get fired? I looked bad in front of my peers. What are they thinking about me? If I get fired, then we can't go on that trip. I can't. How's the college fund going to go? What's going to happen to my kids? I mean, so by the time I sit down,
In seconds, right?
in seconds, yeah, we are very good at catastrophizing. You sit behind your desk, which is a status symbol, and also protects you, physically protects you. I sit in a chair, right, which is now open, so I'm exposed. So my monkey brain's like, what? It's even worse. So no matter what you say next, I either am not hearing and I probably won't remember, even if it's good, right? So that is not a brain friendly way to do something. Now,
How true.
what you could have done is waited till everyone left and sat down next to me and said, "Hey, Bill, how do you think that meeting went?" And again, if I'm not delusional, I'll say, "Yeah, it's all right. I thought some parts were good." And you say, "You know what? I think so too. Why don't we do this? Why don't you put some time on my calendar? You and I are going to work together until we come up with the best version of this meeting. And at that first meeting, what I'd like you to do is bring 2 or 3 ideas that you thought went really well, things that happened that went really well, and maybe we can figure out how to make them even better. And come up with 1 or 2 things that you thought didn't go so well. I'll do the same thing, and we'll just keep working until it happens."
That's a fantastic approach and so easy,
Exactly.
right? 30 seconds.
Yeah, it takes no time at all. But that's brain friendly, right? There's no status issues. There's certainty. I have autonomy. I'm not in the out group, so there's relatedness, and that sounds fair, right?
Yeah, that shoulder to shoulder approach makes all the difference of
Exactly.
just it's you're working together rather
So
than
that's brain friendly. And the last thing I will say is few things truly matter in business or in life,
Mhm.
but those that do matter tremendously. Your job is to figure out what those things are for at least your 2 key constituencies, your customers and your team. If you can figure those things out, everything else will be so much easier.
It's a good scavenger hunt idea. Maybe a team building exercise or
Yeah. Well, there's
something.
definitely ways to do it, and that's what I do with my clients, right? But yeah, those are the tidbits I would give.
Thank you for sharing. Those are really good. And I mean, obviously this is fantastic for the audience, but even for me to take back in our own team, we have 30. So I'm I'm always coming away with good tidbits from these episodes.
Great.
So
Good for
thank
you.
you for sharing. And thank you for coming on, Bill. And then listeners, The Accelerator, I'm your host, Lara Cooper, and thank you for tuning in.